Alright everyone, we have to talk about snap polls. Now I don't like them generally speaking because when you have one data point and you have nothing to compare it to, and you're not necessarily sure that it's a proper sample size, and the poll doesn't add up to 100%, especially, it can't really be considered too reliable. That being said, it is a data point, and it might be fleshed out, and when it makes sense, of course, it's more likely to be true. According to one snap poll, just released the other day, the overwhelming majority of Americans support sending the National Guard in to quell rioters. If the margins that poll claims, because it's something like a 25-point gap, if that holds true, I would think that the fact that people chose to go nuts and burn their own cities is actually going to increase Trump's approval rating. Now, as I said in my previous video, I do have a little bit of an issue with people comparing this to like mid-70s Richard Nixon. Because, of course, when Nixon got reelected, in the wake of considerable social unrest, he cast himself as, I'm going to restore law and order, we're going to get this done. My opponents, they're basically mollycoddling criminals. There were literal terrorist acts going on, there were race riots, and he got reelected in the biggest landslide in U.S. electoral history. A lot of people don't realize this, but Richard Nixon, the only president to be forced to resign, by the way, after being impeached and actually being at risk of removal due to, doing far less than modern administrations usually do, in the post-Reagan era, certainly. Trust me, Clinton, Bush, Obama, all three of them considerably more corrupt than Richard Nixon. Trump jury's still out. Of course, most of the tales of his corruption have turned out to be literal nothing burgers because they've been... For once, the intel agencies have actually bothered to investigate wrongdoing by our chief executive. Too bad they found basically nothing there. Yeah, Papadopoulos, 2 weeks in the county jail. Big scandal there, dude. A waste of taxpayer money. But anyway... He won in a huge... He only lost, if I recall, Washington, D.C. and Massachusetts, and this was in part because people were afraid. And when people are afraid, they're going to cling to the law and order thing. It's just like all these stories, well, the U.S. gets more conservative after riots. Yes, just like after a mass shooting, people buy guns. Because they want safety. And they realize, hey, there are nuts out there. There are actually people out there in their communities that if at the drop of a hat, with the proper impetus to cover them up, will go out in groups at night and smash out windows. The biggest problem with these leftists is that they definitely fucking overstretch. They so overestimated their mandate with the George Floyd killing. Because they started going after the suburbs. What happens when those suburban Karens who are extremely sympathetic towards liberal causes on the social scale, maybe not in the tax sense, they don't want to give up their nice cushy middle class existence, of course, but they are willing to virtue signal and say how privileged they are and how sorry they are, and they're willing to donate $20 to feed some kid in Harlem once in a while. What happens when their car gets scratched? When their leased BMW gets scratched, they go crazy. The Karens will screech about it like a bunch of hens. They're not happy right now because they saw pictures of people with suburban homes getting assaulted. That's not good. Because those suburbs turning blue is that's the reason why Virginia came into play over the last couple of elections. Had been really red. The DC suburbs started getting more blue. A bunch of yuppies moved in, and some of them were sort of like, casual, non-fiscal Democrats. Trust me, again, don't raise their taxes too much or they'll shriek and become GOPers very quickly. They'll go back to being a Reagan youth or something. You'll see another yuppie movement. At the very least, maybe that means, can we get another, Modern Love by David Bowie album? Can we get, New Wave and the New Romantic movement back? Can we get all that cool stuff? Can we get, bungees and things? All the good stuff about the 80s? Zebra tights and stuff, rock that's actually rock music and not, made by Warner Brothers. Those would be nice, by the way. I'm just mouthing off at that point. But be very careful of these snap polls. And of course, there's another snap poll, same exact company, that shows Biden with a double-digit lead over Trump in regards to taking care of racial issues. Now, are these two equivalent? No, in two ways. First, the gap is considerably smaller there than the gap as far as sending in the troops. Secondly, the importance in the mind of the average citizen. If you're thinking about an average independent American, you're not talking about someone like me who leans heavily libertarian. You're not talking about a bread tuber. You're not talking about a Trump superfan with 10 MAGA hats. You're talking about the average American with what we would consider average, if not moderate beliefs. Of course, I think that the sum average is still authoritarian and left-leaning, but that's because I'm a libertarian and I like to keep my own money. Because I don't like to kill people overseas. Most Americans don't have a problem with that as long as it's not too many people. And they much prefer a silent war like an Obama-style drone strike to mass invasion a la like shock and awe. Now, think about which one they're going to prioritize. Race relations or their BMW. I hate to tell you this, but that average suburbanite, lower to middle class, usually white individual cares more about their fiscal well-being and their family's safety than they do some abstract social issue, which even the legacy media, in part, is crucifying at the moment because guess what? Statistically speaking, there is no actual epidemic of police brutality aimed at the black population of the United States. The idea of the United States as a racist empire is completely wrong. If the underpinning is wrong, and the George Floyd case that started this is on shaky ground a little bit too because of multiple drugs and multiple felonies, you got a real recipe for a loss of support among the left, which overstretched. All of these people are now on record as supporting these rioters. Ilhan Omar, and Hillary Clinton, and Pelosi, and all of these others, and Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. They spent days and days praising the demonstrators, the protests, and of course, what people were seeing, it's not a peaceful protest, it's people burning cars, because what do the news TV cameras aim at? They can talk all day about the protests against the George Floyd death, wonderful, but at night after night, you were aiming your news cameras down at burning cities. Which reality did people actually absorb? The abstract one that you're talking about in your fluff pieces, which are designed to shield people like Joe Biden from criticism, or what they saw on your own TV? What they saw from your own broadcast through CNN, MSNBC, or whatever. They saw rioting, looting, thuggish hordes. And they're going to lean heavily against the left, I believe, as the result of that. I think the writing is already on the wall. I think Trump basically won re-election with the fact that the left went nuts so much. They got too violent. They thought, the far left thought, well, you know, if we can't have Bernie as the presidential candidate, we're going to burn things down. Dude, they even told you they were going to do that in Milwaukee. They told you that they were going to burn shit if they were denied their candidate. Hell, they think that Bernie Sanders is a milquetoast, vague, muddled semi-socialist. They think that he's, you know, center-right or something, and they just prefer him because he's at least willing to use the term socialism. They warned you. His own fucking staffers told you this. Remember the Project Veritas releases there? They had 3 or 4 different staffers from the Sanders campaign, and some of them alluding to literally wanting to burn Milwaukee to the ground if at the convention Bernie didn't win. Which, by the way, won't happen. Biden's less than 100 delegates away from clinching, and there's still something like 1,000 delegates up for grabs? And he just beat Bernie in 5 more states, always by double digits. Bernie barely crested over 20% in a single state. He's lost, and he's already conceded. It's not like he's still in the running. Biden would have to die right now for Bernie Sanders to potentially be nominee, and if he did, trust me, the left would get pounded even harder because Bernie's practically the face of the fucking riots. Believe it or not, the average person is really sympathetic towards you when you get killed by cops. They're not really sympathetic towards the causes that spring up after you die because they like the status quo. The idea that the far left will gain some sort of power is prefaced on trying to convince people that the United States is a fallen, terrible place to be. Only if that turns out to be the case for the average person can they possibly hope to prevail. And guess what? There are other political groups that are offering solutions, not just the far left. It definitely emboldens the far right as well, the post-MAGA crowd. It kind of emboldens Trump's fans because they just say, well, yeah, exactly. We've got decades of bad globalistic leadership. That's what we're trying to solve. Give him 4 more years. There are libertarians like me. I argue that a libertarian referendum would take care of many of our problems. So it's not just the far left, the fucking cringe tubers over there that are belching out their verbal diarrhea on a daily basis and being ugly and stupid and saying weird shit about how great Mao was and how the United States is an imperialist fallen entity and it's in late stage capitalism and pretty soon Little Red Book will be replacing the Bible. It's not going to happen, dude. I hate to tell you this, but the average American looks at you and they see a vandal. They see an arsonist. They see someone scary. It doesn't help that you say dumb shit all the fucking time and then you burn your own cities down. Sorry, you lost. That's about all. Peace out.